In the early 1980s in England, they reissued many of Elvis's soundtrack LPs, and I bought pretty much all of them. And one that I particularly enjoyed listening to was Girl Happy. And I also really liked this cover with that deep red background and Elvis in this expensive looking, perfect fitting black shirt that matched his beautifully styled hair. Handsome guy in the middle of the picture here, and I like the lettering on it as well. Very good cover. As for the music, it's a bit uneven on side one, although I really enjoy side two. Most of you will know that the title track, Girl Happy, was sped up by RCA. Although to me, the vocal on Wolf Call sounds the same, or sounds very similar, but I've never read or heard anything about RCA speeding up that song. And I quite like Wolf Call. It's a silly song that you probably couldn't get away with today, but it's got some good drumming on it and a really good guitar solo as well. The guitar solos in Elvis's 60s soundtracks were a bit hit and miss, but I do like this one. It's got a raw edge to it, which I like, a good edgy sound. And I also really like Do Not Disturb at the end of side one. Elvis apparently struggled with that in the studio. It took him many takes to get it right, but you can't tell that by listening to it. The middle songs on side one are probably the weakest on the album, especially the Fort Lauderdale Chamber of Commerce, the third song. And once again, it's one of those plot songs. It wouldn't make any sense away from the movie. And it's, again, probably the weakest on the album. Side two, I think, is much stronger than side one. And it gets off to a really good start with Cross My Heart and Hope to Die, which has a great arrangement there with the bass, drums, piano, and saxophone combining to make a really funky background there. And the vocal, of course, is great, as you'd expect. And I also really like the next song, The Meanest Girl in Town. It's really frantic, and the saxophone solo in the middle just keeps up that tension. And the backing vocals are really good, and I like the lyrics as well. The vocal melody is a bit corny. You know how it goes.
She'll tell you that she loves you, make you feel just like a king. She'll cry to you and lie to you. She'll do most anything.
And Elvis was occasionally given that kind of melody to sing in the 60s movies like Hard Knocks and Carney Town in Roustabout, and again in Speedway, There Ain't Nothing Like a Song. And not really a vocal challenge for him, but of course he does it with aplomb as usual. And the next song is the single Do the Clam, which comes in for a lot of criticism, but I quite like it, and I can't really think of another song on the album that would have made a better single. It wasn't really a very commercial song, and dance tunes had pretty much gone out of style by 1965, but as I say, there wasn't really any other single choice on the album. And I like the instrumental section in the middle, and when I was a kid I was very impressed with how the music panned from one speaker to the other in the middle of that instrumental section. And again, you have another good solo on the guitar, and the saxophone played by Boots Randolph is, as ever, really good. And he's definitely one of the great unsung heroes of Elvis's 1960s music. He was there right from the first session in 1960 and still playing on the Speedway sessions at the end in 1968. Puppet on a String, the next song, is another ballad. You always get a couple of ballads on these soundtrack albums, and they're always well done. Some are more successful than others. This one I don't quite like as much as Do Not Disturb, although it's well done, of course, and I just wonder if it might have worked better without the Jordanaires' vocals. Not that there's a problem with them, but I just think that if they'd stripped down the arrangement to just Elvis, the piano, the bass, and some light drumming, it might have worked even better. The next song, I've Got to Find My Baby, is probably the weakest one on side two, fairly ordinary rock song. And even Boots Randolph's saxophone solo can't really do much for this one. But the album finishes with a stronger song, which is You'll Be Gone, the B-side to Do the Clam. This one is, of course, a bonus song that had been recorded a couple of years earlier. And I remember reading somewhere that Elvis was pretty embarrassed about this song. And he apparently, took the song into the studio and wanted to get it done and dusted as quickly as possible. And I think it was Peter Guralnick who wrote that. I can't remember where I read it. So if you're familiar with that story, let me know where I read it. And that song was supposedly co-written by Elvis and Charlie Hodge and Red West, although what Elvis's contribution was, I'm not sure. So that's a quick run through of Girl Happy, an album that I still enjoy listening to this day. Kissing Cousins was Elvis's 8th movie soundtrack LP. but there was a noticeable drop-off in quality compared to the first 7. The movie itself was notoriously made within literally a few days, and I guess these songwriters were also working to similar deadlines because the quality of the songs also suffers in this album. But I'm going to try and stick to the positives, and you can draw your own conclusions about the other songs. Once again, we have a decent theme tune. Kissing Cousins was also the hit song from the album. The songwriter Randy Starr actually claims that it was kept off the #1 position by the Beatles, who had the top 5 positions that particular week, and Kissing Cousins got to #6. However, I haven't been able to find any evidence of Kissing Cousins getting as high as #6. As far as I know, it got to #12 in Billboard and #10 in Cashbox. So if any of you can corroborate Randy Starr's story, do let me know. And we actually get 2 theme tunes on this album. There's also Kissing Cousins #2 on side 1, and I actually have a slight preference for #2. The album also has more than its fair share of ballads. There are 4 ballads on here, and the ballads are always a pretty safe bet on the soundtrack albums. The best one for me, without doubt, is Tender Feeling, which is based on the American song Shenandoah. Once Is Enough is another song that I like on the album. It's a straight rock and roll song, so it's not particularly challenging for Elvis. I think It's a Long Lonely Highway has a bit more meat on its bones. But Once Is Enough has a nice tight little sax solo, and it has some good lyrics as well.
What's the good of reaching 90 if you waste 89? You got one life, so live it. If you don't, it's a crime.
One of the songwriters on the album, Dolores Fuller, spoke of the sensual and sexual content of There's Gold in the Mountains. Well, let's see what she was talking about.
There's such beauty there in the mountains. You can feel your knees growing weak. Every single boy feels the height of joy when he climbs that mountain peak.
Well, I never noticed that when I was a kid. Dolores Fuller also said, I was very big on double entendres, and that's something that I'll be coming back to when looking at some of the other albums, because double entendres were a constant throughout Elvis's 1960s soundtrack albums. But ultimately, for me, Kissing Cousins is an album I prefer to listen to on CD. In for a penny, in for a pound, as they say. I was asked to do a video ranking the Elvis soundtrack albums recently, and I've decided to do that as I go through these double features videos. So if I go back to last week, I talked about Frankie and Johnny and Clambake, and I would put Clambake ahead of Frankie and Johnny there. And if I add in today's 2 albums, I would put Go Happy at #2 behind Clambake, and Kissing Cousins, unfortunately, would go right to the bottom of the list at #4. That's it for today. I'll try and do another one of these videos before long. Thanks for watching. Cheers.